Hello, colleagues, and welcome to another episode of DINCast, where we're going to be talking about probably one of the hottest topics that's out there this moment in time, which is complexity, which genuinely seems to be everywhere. Complexity, uncertainty, and all of the things that flow from that. So I'm delighted that we've got an expert to actually take us through the whole world of sort of complexity. And once again, we're joined by Stephen Carver from Cranfield School of Management. Hi, Stephen.
Hi there, Ian. It's lovely to be with you all again.
Yeah, thank you very much for giving us your time today. I know we've done a DINCast for you from you before, back in the old lockdown days and what have you. But for those people who don't know you and Cranfield, could you sort of tell us a little bit about yourself?
Okay, I work there at Cranfield. I'm a senior lecturer in change and project and program management, but anything that changes. Before that, life history, used to be an engineer, North Sea oil business, lots of change, worked my way up. Then I went to work for Virgin, got an MBA. Then I worked for a large multinational, lots of change and strategy there. And then decided to go and work for the nastiest boss in the world, who is myself. Ever since I've run my own consultancy business, and Cranfield have had me for the last 25 years as well. That's me.
Brilliant, and a well-lived sort of life and career. So I'm sure you've got a lot of views on these issues. So first question, I suppose, is so why is everyone interested or talking about complexity at the moment?
Because of the chaos, or the perceived chaos. You think about it, even 3 years ago, the world was a difficult place. Then we had Trump spouting change every day. Then we had the pandemic. We have global warming. Right in the middle of the pandemic, in case you missed it, a mile-wide asteroid almost hit us and wiped us out as a species. Then we got the vaccine. Then we thought we're back to where we were. Then we had Putin in Ukraine. Then we had energy prices going mad. Then we lost a queen. Then we got a king. Then we lost prime minister. Then we lost another prime minister. Then we got another prime minister. Then we lost a prince. And people are just thinking, enough, we can't manage, it's chaotic. But in fact, it's not. It's just events, dear boy, events. And if you embrace complexity and embrace the change, believe it or not, you can enjoy it and actually do some really positive things with it.
So can complexity actually be used for sort of business advantage then?
Oh, most certainly. You look at people like Elon Musk and Bezos, you can love them or loathe them, and I do in equal quantities, but they are what we call disruptors. I used to work for a disruptor, that was Branson. He'd go into a business sector that he knew nothing about. Look at trains, some would say he still doesn't, but there you go. He would go in, airlines, trains, whatever, disrupt it all, and then move very quickly in that disrupted market. And nobody else could catch him up, which was very clever.
And in terms of sort of, I use the term sort of complexity, complexity, complicated, complex, and things like that. Could you sort of just give us an understanding of what is the difference between those terms?
In fact, I have a quote here from an academic. You'll love this one. Okay, are you ready? Complex adaptive systems are different from systems that are merely complicated. Systems defined in terms of individual constituents, even if there's a huge number of constituents, is merely complicated. If the interactions among the constituent systems, the interaction between the system and the environment is such a nature, the system as a whole cannot be fully understood simply by analysing its components, it is complex. You think, right, clear as mud, typical academic. But at the end of the paper, he came up with a beautiful quote, this guy called Sillars. He said, so a jumbo jet is complicated, but mayonnaise is complex. And actually that is genius, because if you take a jumbo jet and say to Boeing, take it apart, put it all back together again, it's a jumbo jet. So a jumbo jet is not complex, believe it or not. Academically, it is merely a whole pile of complication that can be worked through logically. It only becomes complex when you put a pilot in it. Whereas mayonnaise, once you've made it, that's it, mate. It's mayonnaise. And so I guess we've got to love mayonnaise more. And we've done a lot of research here at Cranfield on complexity. And if you like, do you want the 2-minute potted version academically?
Yeah, that'll be really helpful.
So complicated, just like a machine, can be big, but complicated can be small or big. Complex, again, can be small or big. A lot of people say to me, oh, look at my big complex project. And often I say, well, it's a big project, but it's not complex. It's just complicated. You're just building some houses. And people say, no, look at the bill. It must be complex. And you think, not really. planning will be complex because there's a lot of human interaction there, but building the house is relatively large, complicated, not complex. So what we did at Cranfield, or some very clever gurus did at Cranfield, was to take the, I think, over 40 different types of complexity as defined by academics, and reduced it down to 3, which is a manageable sort of, tool to, or lenses as they called it, to look at a project or a change project. So the 3 lenses are a blue lens, we called it blue lens, structural lens. This is the amount of people involved, the number of houses you're building, the number of subcontractors, all of which is difficult. I'm not saying it's easy, but it is relatively straightforward to manage in terms of we got tools and techniques and work breakdown structures and critical paths and budgets and RACI matrices. So number of bits, number of people involved. That's the blue structural. Now, the next one is the one that causes all the trouble at the moment, which is the green, which is what we call emergent complexity. And that's how much the world is changing around you as you're trying to do your change. So here you are, a housing association, and suddenly the government say, oh, net zero. And you think, well, hang on a minute, it's hard enough building houses. What's all this net zero stuff? Well, the world's changed. We all have to comply with all this stuff. Well, what is it? Well, we haven't dreamt it up yet, but we will. And here's a drop dead date and everything's got to meet it. So this is what we call emergent complexity, often outside actors impacting on your project. So it can be the currencies, Putin invading, price of wood going through the roof. So this is emergent complexity. And the third one is the red one. So we've had the blue one, structural, we've had the green one, emergent. The red one is what we call socio-political. So this is stakeholders, people, personalities, people changing their minds, culture, personality clashes, all of those nasty things which no one ever really talks about in project or change management. They all like to talk about the tools and the budget because it's solid. But when you talk about, well, we're going to have problems with this council because one of the councillors hates us, it's not written down in a brief, but wow, that can be the biggest problem you're ever going to have. Now, that's fairly straightforward. So you've got 3 types of complexity. What they then said was, okay, which one causes most trouble? And they did a big piece of work, over 200 qualified, statistically correct project and change managers. Explain this thing, 3 complexities. Which one causes you all the trouble on your projects? Have a guess, Ian.
I would imagine it would possibly be the socio and political one.
Funny you should say that. About 80% of all change management projects come from the socio-political. We then asked a second question, and I heard grown men and women actually groan when we asked it. We said, good. So in your typical work and in your training and development, which of the 3 complexities has received the most attention? Structural, emergent, or socio-political?
I would imagine it would probably be either the first or the second one.
Absolutely. About 70% of their time and their training goes on structural, and yet 80% of all their problems come from socio-political. If you want, one nugget of information this morning, and we've got academic papers that prove it, companies tend to concentrate on the wrong things when it comes to complexity, and they're surprised by the outcome being, shall we say, non-optimal.
So we've got sort of these definitions sort of broken down now. If I'm an individual or I'm a leader working in an organization, how do you actually go about assessing complexity within our business?
We have the complexity assessment tool. Now, I was involved in this one. The academics came up and said, we're going to have a complexity assessment tool. And I said, rock on, this sounds good. So they said, right, here are the 248 questions you have to ask people. And I said, no. As a practitioner, you're going to lose the will to live or possibly go murderous after the first 50 questions. So no, reduce it down. So we reduced it down to about 30 questions. And it's free. I'll give you a copy. You can send out your members, and it's just one side of A4, basically 30 questions, true, false sort of things. And out of that, you can assess where your problems are coming from on your project. But the most interesting thing about what we call the CAT, complexity assessment tool, is you hand it out to everyone on the project that you want to, and say, fill it out. Don't have to put your name on it. Get them all back in, and let's have a look at it. And the spread is unbelievable. So everyone having completely different views about where the main problems on the project are coming from. And that in itself is an education. But what comes out of it is that most of them are socio-political.
It's interesting, sort of, different ways organizations and individuals look at this. I remember one of the study visits we went on, we went inside of Apple, and Apple shared with us this phrase that they have, which is, any idiot can add complexity into a process. It takes a genius to take something out around that.
Yep.
Which sort of fits with what you're talking about in terms of, stop adding things in.
Yeah, and it's interesting because that is another area, which is, hey, do you want pure process? And of course, yes and no. At certain phases of a change project, you really don't want process. So if you're in the creative phase, I've just been building a passive house, a net zero house for my sins, for my own entertainment, certainly not my benefit of my budget, but doing the right thing. And we had to go through council planning. Now, if you think that that is a strict process which is logically run, then you're mad. The whole thing is socio-political. You have to talk to the councillors individually, collectively, try and get the stakeholders. You've got to have the NIMBYs, as we had, turning up and screaming blue murder at all the meetings and petitions. And you have to manage that mess. And to say, well, the decision we made in a rational way by rational people using a rational process, no. But as of 3 months' time, when we start to actually build this house, I want process. I want them to pour concrete in a logical and sensible way. I don't want them to make it up as it goes along. I want all of the socio-political things nailed by that stage as much as you can.
But we live in a society now where everybody has got a voice. Whether this is on social media or where have you, which is, again, I don't know whether that adds to sort of the complexity, but it certainly adds to the democracy around sort of listening to sort of people. So do you see the point in time whereby we might sort of pivot and start to realize, hang on, we've gone too far down this route and we do need to start to simplify things?
We do need to simplify, as Einstein said, simplify, right up to the point where it makes no more sense. But one has to be careful. Oversimplification is a bad thing. You mentioned stakeholders. We run courses on stakeholder management and simulations, and I guess I've had to do it with this house as well. Initially, we knew that everyone would scream blue murder. No one likes change. Everyone wants the benefits of change. Nobody wants the change itself, all the mess and disruption. So we had this avalanche of negativity thrown towards us. Now, because I teach it, I guess I kind of, once one does get emotionally involved, I kind of said, this is normal. We teach this. Okay, just keep communicating, be open, be honest. And eventually the center of gravity moved from we hate you and go away to, well, actually these people are trying to do the right thing and it's not as bad as we thought. And there were still some naysayers over there, and there always will be, don't worry. And then people started saying, do you know what, this could be good for the street, and actually it's good for the environment, and actually it gets built in 4 days and not a whole year. Isn't that good? Isn't that wonderful? And then we had people saying, yeah, this is fantastic. And so the center of gravity started moving over towards the positive side. And so that's where we kind of hit the council, and things were okay. But initially, appalling. And you're always going to have outliers on both sides, zealots who are either completely for you or completely against you, both of which, by the way, are terribly dangerous. But don't worry, in the end, they just sound like raving zealots, and everyone largely ignores them.
Well, look, thank you so much, Stephen, for the whistle-stop tour through complexity and
that was a 4-hour lecture in about 14 minutes.
That's what people like now: span of attention,
simplification. There you go. Yeah,
absolutely. But yeah, we'll certainly share your questionnaire around with members, and I look forward to our next sort of sessions of talking with Stephen Carver. So thank you very much for your time, sir.
As always, a pleasure, Ian, and keep up the good work.